Hey, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the One Step Better podcast. I am Mike Schaefer, and back with me in studio for the first time in a couple weeks is Matt Patrick. Matt, welcome back, man.
A-team back in the house.
That's right. All the other people that have hosted this with me right now are listening and saying, man, A-team, what? Come on, I thought we did a better job.
They probably did. Yeah. I'm not very good, but I'll say pat myself on the back here.
That's right. Well, welcome back. Glad to have you back. Hopefully you've enjoyed being gone for a little bit. I know you've been working and doing a bunch of other stuff, but
yep, glad to be back.
Welcome back. If you guys are out there listening, really appreciate you joining us today. We're going to talk about something that is an evolution of performance management that we've been dealing with for well over a year. And, we kind of have it.
We're getting near the finish line.
We got it to the point where we're ready to talk about it. This is a conversation that we've been tabling every single week for about 6 to 8 months or so that we know we want to talk about because it's that important. We didn't really feel prepared yet to talk about it. And so we're gonna release that today. And so hopefully you benefit from that conversation. Again, like everything we do here, it's not because we have something figured out or some secret sauce, but it's just this is our evolution of trying to figure things out.
We are working on it.
Running a company. And so appreciate you guys listening to us wherever you are, whether you're watching us on YouTube or listening to us on Spotify, Google Play, Apple Podcast, all of the places. And so we're going to get started today with our fun question of the week. That's a little bit more serious this time, not super serious, but a little bit more serious. And this is the question, Matt, what is the best piece of advice you have ever been given?
Well, got a couple answers here. So I got a couple best pieces. I'll start with, happy wife, happy life. That's the easy one, right? Whatever Mandy says for me to do, I do, and just say yes, ma'am, and do it. The other one probably is to let people know when I'm talking out loud. Probably that was one that came from our leadership group. I have a tendency to think out loud, and it's probably good for me to tell people that I'm doing that as opposed to just make it a proclamation. And then thirdly, probably is shut up and think and pray more on things. Yeah. All those things are probably good.
Just stop talking, right?
Yeah.
Shut up and listen.
Shut up and listen is a good one. Stop dropping your pen.
Yeah.
Stop, drop, and roll. That was another good piece of advice.
It was back in grade school, whatever.
Yeah, teachers, right. Stop, drop, and roll.
There's a fire in the building, and you're on fire.
So stop, drop, and roll.
And then
good advice.
I'm gonna butcher this, but Landon came home. This was 2 years ago or so, and they were talking about gun safety in school.
Shoot first and ask questions later. Oh,
it's not quite that
different one.
And they've come up with a kind of a similar thing that stop, drop, and roll for like the fire side, but for gun safety, it was like stop, see, run, or it was just like when you see a gun, this is how you're supposed to act. And I remember when he saw it, I was like, that's different. I've never heard that one before. So that's neither here nor there. Best piece of advice I've ever been given. Man, I have no idea. A couple that come to mind. Like you mentioned, listen more, talk less, I think is always something that needs to be done. Leaders or readers is a big one that I think changed me. I remember Jay Strack was a leadership guy that I went to a conference years and years ago. And one of the things that he said is 10 years from now, 15 years from now, X number of years from now, you're going to be different based on two things, the books you read and the people that you hang out with. And that's about it. And that's always kind of stuck with me, just from the standpoint of, who you associate yourself with is going to make a big difference on who you are, as well as the books that you read is going to shape and form opinions. I think those were absolutely true, and I've always remembered that. But at the same time, man, so much good advice out there. Most of it coming from this podcast.
That's right.
Matt and I are.
That's right. When I'm in that building, man, wisdom. It's just boom.
A-team, baby.
Brilliance, A-team. I always like the one of surround yourself with people smarter than you are.
Yeah.
And so I can't wait to one day do that.
I think about it all the time, right?
I'm hoping I can do that one day.
One day I'll arrive.
I'm kidding. Yeah.
That's so true, though. So true. Surround yourself with people that are smarter than you, better than you, encourage you, push you on.
It's not very hard for me to do, so it's easy. It's a low bar to overcome.
Happy wife, happy life.
That's a good one, man.
This is one.
To Mandy, who always says, always do talk bad about you on the podcast. This is for you, baby. You're the best.
Yeah. This is one that
if I call her a high C one more time, she's going to punch me.
As she should. I can be argumentative just for the sake of being argumentative.
No
you know
way.
that about
No
me.
way, Mike. I did not believe that you said that.
Right. This is happy wife, happy life is a comment that can sometimes strike me in the way that I just want to push back against it.
Of course.
Because you know what? If your wife is being a jackwagon, you don't need to be saying, you know what?
Mike,
But luckily, you and I don't ever have to worry about
this
that.
This is the episode you say, hey, honey, you don't need to listen now. It wasn't very good.
As soon as this podcast downloads to Meredith's phone, I'm going to go delete it. She'll never hear it.
Meredith, you're the best.
Yeah. Flowers are on the way.
That's right. This sound is expensive. Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just one of those sayings that sometimes people say, and it just, for whatever reason, it just strikes a nerve. And it's like,
yeah,
man,
I mean,
is that always true though?
It needs to be more of a mutual agreement. Just don't want to be the person who just agrees with everything they say.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound any fun.
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen because I'm not going to do that.
But I can, but at the same time, it's an absolute true statement. When my wife is happy,
things are a lot better.
Things are a lot better than when she's not. And luckily I got a great wife that spends most of her time being happy. I think it's because of her awesome husband, but that I'm biased.
I thought it was all the chemicals you put in her coffee in the morning. So,
oh man, we need to move on before neither of us have a place to
go
home
longer married. That's right.
Well, as I teased at the outset, is we're going to be talking today about something that we've been wanting to talk about for a while and just didn't really feel fully prepared or equipped. And that's probably still true, but I think we feel a little bit better prepared to talk about it. And that is kind of our process and reasoning for developing what we call KRAs, key results areas. And to kind of give you guys some backgrounds, if this is your first introduction to KRAs, but you've probably seen it around a little bit if you're listening to this podcast, you know we've talked about it before. A KRA is simply a 1 or 2 page outline of different job responsibilities in our world. And so what we do is we develop a KRA, a key result area for every position that we have in the firm. And the goal for that is to get alignment between the person that's in that position and, leadership, company expectations, that type of stuff. And the reason we've been a little bit more hesitant to talk about it is because we've been in the process of developing KRAs for a long time.
2+ years, probably. And
it's been so slow, not because we're unable to make decisions or because we wanted to get these so right because it's been something that has been missing in our firm for a while as far as a formalized document that we wanted to do it right.
Yeah, this is the evolution. Right? So a lot of people had the evolution of a job description, right? What does this job entail? And we had those written for a long time, but that's so all encompassing, and it also isn't specific enough. It's not something that we can really define what what are the results or outcomes we expect from this position. And that's where it really kind of went from there. And we've been trying to build, we have a couple roles that are very hard to build these on. And we kind of, I guess, either, kind of dealt with them too long or just never made a decision, but we kind of pushed them to the finish line finally.
And part of that is the reason we're talking about today is because we're finally to the point where we have KRAs developed for over half of our positions in our company, which we know we still got a far ways to go. And the reason that these KRAs are important is because it provides clear expectations for everybody in each position. We get down, and we'll talk through kind of what our KRAs look like, but we're getting down into the weeds of if you do these items, then you're winning in your role. And we're modeling this based off of our A players, the best people in each of the roles that we have. What are they doing that's making them successful that really quantifies how we define them as A players? And for some roles, that is a lot easier than other roles, but it really provides clear expectations. That way, Becky, for example, if she has a clear KRA and it may say that she has to record 3 podcasts a week or, whatever it may be, I don't have to go to Becky and say, hey, Becky, how are you doing? Becky doesn't have to come to me and say, hey, Mike, how am I doing? Not that those conversations don't happen, but there is an expectation that's very clear on both sides to where Becky already knows whether or not she's winning. I already know whether or not she's winning. So when we do come together, we can skip the how are things going part and just get down to, hey, you know what? You're knocking it out because you're doing this every single week. High five, way to go. How can I help you, encourage you to continue on and what can we tweak? It allows our conversations to be more forward focused and backwards looking.
I like you said earlier, it's the clarity knowing what everybody's on the same page, both the person in the role and the leadership and the other teammates know what that person is, what does success look like for that role? And it's I think it is eye opening as we define it. One of the things, a couple of things we figured out, is the some people can have multiple roles they're currently wearing, and some people, so they have to have multiple KRAs for each of those roles. We have people that are operating in, they're going through the process of getting promoted or, to go to the next step. So those responsibilities, they're going to see their new role and their old role and why those both matter. And so just kind of part of that understanding of how it was built.
Yeah. Another thing that I like about our KRAs is that it gives us a framework to already have feedback where I always give the example, if you're in grade school or elementary, middle school, wherever, if you're in a classroom environment and over the loudspeaker comes, "Hey, Matt Patrick, I need you to see you in the principal's office." You're immediately thinking,
I'm going to get a spanking.
Oh, goodness. You went to a different school than I did.
We spanked in my elementary school.
But there's a level of anxiety that comes on with that because you have no idea. You could be walking into, "Hey, you know what? You did such a great job. You won your class ice cream party." Who knows?
Yeah.
But whenever you have a clear KRA, you already have that framework for feedback in place. So everybody kind of can come to the table already knowing what those expectations are, already knowing whether or not you're meeting them, so that, like I mentioned earlier, you can start to look towards how can I improve, or what needs to change, or where am I doing really well, and how do I need to encourage that to continue?
Well, the KRA is nice because it has both here's what the results we're looking to have, and here's how you measure those results. So it's very much like SMART goals, and you have, they have to be specific and results oriented and measurable and whatever, obtainable and repeatable and all that.
Time bound.
Yeah, whatever those acronym stands for, SMART goals. But the reality of it is because they are very specific. Here is a metric that we're going to measure that says you are succeeding in this role. And that helps, I think, everybody understand this is what our expectations are.
Yeah. And what we try to do is we try to align our KRAs along with job descriptions and core values so that there's kind of a cascading effect where, for example, one of our core values is team first. And so if Becky goes, or in her KRA, you're never going to find something that says, "Hey, you need to be a lone wolf," that never includes your team. Because we were trying to mix these things together. And it gives, from a leadership perspective, it gives us a little bit of clarity in knowing what we need to ask for out of our team, because we're trying to align those with the bigger picture that the firm as a whole has. So let's talk a little bit about what the structure and kind of what goes into our KRA, how that document looks. For us, I try to get it down to about one page. If it has to be a little bit longer, the first thing I would say is maybe you need to look at, weeding that down a little bit.
Filler words.
Yeah. Try to get it down
Smaller
to one
font,
page.
wider margins, like a paper.
That's right.
Yeah.
Zero margins, really small font.
Yeah. No problem. One page is no problem then.
Yeah. Yeah. But there's really kind of, I'll say, a handful of items that goes into it. One of the things that you absolutely want to list on your KRA, other than like, this is the job title or whatever it may be, is who is that person reporting to? When there's an issue, what is the name of the person, not just the title, but the name of the person that job reports to. So for example, if you were to look at my KRA, it would say reports to Matt Patrick. Yep. And so I now have a very clear understanding of if there's really an issue that comes up that I need to know who to go to, that I know who that is. It's Matt.
Right.
I also know who's going to hold me primarily accountable for my role.
Yep.
It's Matt. And so whenever Becky comes to me and says, "Hey, Mike, you didn't do this well and you're fired because you suck at XYZ," I could look at Becky and be like, "What? Who are you?
Go talk to
You
Matt.
need to go talk to Matt."
And I would say, "I agree with you, Becky."
Yeah. And then, I told Becky to do that. Yeah.
I told Becky to fire you. Worked out great.
Right.
I delegate well.
Who you report to is important.
It does.
And that's one that I think in a small business seems like it's a little bit unnecessary. But always remember, from the perspective of a new hire, these are absolutely critical for, it gives them clarity whenever they're still learning the ropes. Mm-hmm. We're 30 people strong, a little bit over 30 people strong. And anybody that comes into our office knows that Matt Patrick is the owner of this place.
Right.
Everybody knows that if you're a new hire. At the same time, if you are a new hire, you may not know that Kim Pope is the director of accounting on day one.
Right.
And that Shelby Betts leads our leadership team, or, might not know those things as well yet. And so having those, a clear picture and a clear name attached to it, whenever.
Well, it's nice. It does give you a very clear, as we've defined our teams better. So that's part of it. We defined our teams better, and then we defined the role within the team. And then you have a good understanding of, okay, who do I report to? And if I report, and then who does that person report to? But also, who can I go to with my questions or challenges, and how does that process work? And so defining really clear who you are, kind of whose team are you on, and who reports to you is a part of that too, right? So you have to know who reports to you.
Yep. And that's what I'll say next. The next thing that's got to be on there is, do you have any direct reports that are part of that? Along with what team are you a part of? If you have different departments, divisions, whatever it may be in your organization, go ahead and list those on your KRAs. That way Becky clearly knows this is the team that I'm on. I clearly know this is the team that I'm on, because it does provide clarity. The whoever reports to you, the direct reports piece of that, gives you an idea of exactly who you're responsible to manage. Sometimes this may be job titles and not necessarily people's names, depending upon turnover, whatnot. But so if you're looking at my KRA, it's going to say our client success specialist, or different job titles. These are the people that report to me. And now I walk into that position knowing I'm responsible for these folks. If you're in that title, if you're in that job, I'm responsible to make sure that you're doing your job. It also tells me I'm responsible to holding you accountable for doing your job. From a leadership standpoint,
you're being held accountable to your job. Yep. And therefore you hold your people accountable to their job.
Yep. And that way, in that example, if Becky goes off the deep end and starts going crazy, if she may not be my direct report, I still have maybe a little bit of, in my role, hey, let's go talk about this. But I also know that, hey, whoever her boss is needs to handle that, and I can go encourage them to handle that or whatever. But I know that I don't need to be jumping into that, because that's not my spot to jump into. And again, the size of company, all that stuff plays into that greatly.
The importance here is understanding how your structure is set up so that you can enable or empower your people to have a clear line of sight of who they need to talk to and who they're responsible to and who they're responsible for.
Yeah. Because again, it goes back to, without clarity, people are going to be filling in the blanks. And as soon as that starts to happen, we don't really know what's going on.
Go, well, I thought I had to do this because this person asked me to. That. Well, that wasn't your responsibility, and it also wasn't what we were looking for you to do. You then weren't able to do what you were supposed to be doing. So it just makes things clear.
Yeah, those guardrails are clearly up. Mm-hmm. And then the two pieces that are the meat of the document, the most important piece of this, is it's twofold. It's one, a clear job description. And then there's also KPIs attached to it. Talk to me a little bit about the description piece of developing a KRA.
Yep. So we call that the results areas. The key results areas are, the bigger, broader areas. So as we've done this recently for our accounting managers, it's, client management is a real big piece of that. But what does that include? What does client management mean? Or it's development of the staff. That's another one of their big areas. Where does that include? And so we have what I'd say is a major header category of their primary responsibility. So in ours is client management, staff development, tax services, customer service.
This is the 3 to 5 bullet point items of, if you do your job well, this is what you're doing.
These are the areas that you're succeeding in. And then they'll give some, I'd say, details in how we want that accomplished, but not overly detailed.
Correct.
The idea behind that is that we are going to give them some information on, these are the areas that would include. So in our world, it would be, hey, you are monitoring and developing your staff to deliver everything based on our internal due dates.
Yep. So let's talk about that for a second, because what you just said is an absolute one of those bullet points that we would see on a KRA. But the important part about this is that it's results focused. Mm-hmm. You didn't say develop staff. Mm-hmm. You said manage and develop your staff so that they are doing XYZ.
It is a result. It is the outcome by which we want them to do.
It's not, if everything goes well, this is the result of them doing that.
And so one of ours is monitor and ensure, that all internal deadlines are being met. Our KPI associated with that would be 100% of our internal deadlines are met every single month. Yeah. That's the result we expect. It's not I almost got there. Yeah. 90% is good. No, 90% is not good.
Yeah. Because if you just leave it at, in our world, deliver financials. Okay, great.
All of them were delivered. We eventually delivered every financial that was required.
It took me 3 years to do it, but I did it.
I'm only 2 years behind right now, and we're ready to catch back up. That's not how we do things.
But and that's an extreme example, but where it allows for confusion is if Becky thought deliver financials meant as soon as I can get to them, I'll get them delivered. And I thought it meant this is going to happen this week. There's a gap there. And that gap is going to cause frustration on my end until I go to Becky and say, this is what happened. And then it's going to cause frustration on Becky's end because, well, I thought I was doing well. And now I'm being told I'm not doing well at all. And there is a big gap of misunderstanding that's happening there that could have been easily avoided if there was just more clarity around what those expectations are. The KRA, the key results area, allows you to put those expectations on paper and tie those to clear metrics that are measurable so that Becky already knows the result before I have to approach and say, hey, Becky, what's going on with this?
Yeah. And so, like you said, we have 4 or 5, 3 to 5 bullet points of what the broad area of responsibility is, and then the details by which results we're looking to get in those areas. And then we have anywhere from 4 to 10 KPIs, depending on bullets, but they're very specific and they're tied to exactly a result. So, it's something that we want to have an expectation of a metric that we're going to monitor, and we have to be able to monitor it, and we have to be able to track it and report on it.
Yep. And
it's the person in that role responsibility to report to their leader about how they're doing, or with their leader, not necessarily to their leader, but with their leader.
A couple of the things that I found as we jumped into this is on the front end, I had a hesitancy to determine, can we really boil everything down? Because we do get very specific. And my first thought was, if we just say this is what winning is, what about everything else that goes into that role? And it forced me, because I was hesitant because of that. And it forced me to think about, if a person does these 3 or 5 things exceptionally well, then the other stuff
may not get done.
I wasn't going to say that other stuff that wasn't listed isn't typically going to get dropped because they're doing the things that are winning really, really well. And in that role, that's primary. They can't keep a job unless they do this stuff super well. The other stuff we can coach up on over time. And, not that we wouldn't coach up on the primary stuff, but it just really became secondary in a big way that I didn't expect it to be.
Yeah, it did. It allowed a lot of clarification for me too. And this is an exercise I've been working really hard on the last month. And it was the idea of, how do we define stuff that maybe not be definable? So that was the hard part, figuring out. And those are the roles that we're going to have some challenges with. So as we're building this out, and we have Rose in the client care coordinator seat that's, deals with our inbound and outbound traffic. All right, what's our expectations as far as how often, how is she answering the phone? How quickly? How our messages are being responded to? What's our expectations as far as stuff going in and out the door? What's our responsibility for handling the vendor, making sure the front desk area is clean, making sure that people are welcomed in the way we want them to be welcomed. Those are all areas that we have to define a metric that says, hey, I expect you to answer all calls within 3 rings or 2 rings or whatever that may be. And that all messages you've confirmed have been returned every day, or whatever, whatever our metric needs to be.
Yeah.
And so that's the part that will be challenging.
Yeah. And just to clarify there, the result area may be something along the lines of providing excellent customer service, or whatever. I know that's very generic, but then the measurable piece of that is, right, you answered the phone calls within X rings, or you returned emails within X time, whatever it may be. But the result of doing these measurable activities is going to be, our clients are super happy with you.
Yeah. I think of some of the metrics I would think of is every person that enters our office is greeted and and you've required them to, state their purpose and sign in, or whatever we need to do there. So we have a good, tracking of who came in and out the door.
Yeah.
For security purposes.
Yeah. You offered a bottle of water to all of our guests, or a cup of coffee, or whatever.
There's always water in the front desk, that kind of stuff. It's little stuff, but that's the stuff that is something she knows that, hey, I was not witty because I didn't, the water cooler wasn't full.
And what this allows organizations to do is, when you define what winning looks like for every role, you have freedom to evaluate on that, but you also are removing the unclear, unsaid, unspoken differences between people. Because I think I've said this before, I don't feel like I'm super great at the customer satisfaction stuff that we do on a frequency, a regular frequency, the maintaining of it. New clients I'm great with, and getting them in rhythm I'm great with. But if I'm being honest, I kind of lose interest in it because, hey, you know what? You're up and running. Everything is smooth. We're good. I don't like maintaining that on an ongoing basis. And so I don't feel like I'm super great at that. And so for me, great customer service, maybe I responded to that email 3 days after it was sent. But to someone like Casey, who is super great at that, great customer satisfaction is I responded to that email within an hour. And I think I'm doing great. She thinks she's doing great. Somebody at some point is going to have to come along and actually say, this is what great is, not that. And the KRAs is really what allows leadership to define the culture of the organization in a way that is very clear, very specific. So it's not left up to a person that may be new, they may not be a high performer, whatever it is, to define that culture for you.
Agree. That's been fun too, as far as the process, understanding customer service as part of this. And so we did put metrics around answering and returning of phone calls and response rates and what our expectations are there. And there's different roles with different metrics for different roles. How we want to communicate, how we expect, in our world, accuracy, quality control, all those different things, all those different aspects of our business need to be very clearly defined and what our expectations are. And it's and not just expectations, it's really is what does winning look like? Yeah. If our expectations is, I expected you to return that email every day. That's great. That's not winning though. Yeah. You return all the emails you're supposed to do. Yeah. I'd like you to return that within 2 hours. We're
not trying to coach up people to be B players.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want it to be like, we do things uncommonly well. That's what we want to do. Yeah. And so part of the process.
Yeah. And you maybe
got stuck though, right? We got stuck.
We got stuck, and it was, man, I think and we had some issues with getting clearly defined metrics in place, and we switched over some of our reporting stuff, and it just kind of kicked the can down the curb. But we've always known this is super, super important to get in place, and we've had loose versions of this in place for a while. But goodness, this is going to come out on here kind of towards the end of June. And
we'll have already presented by then.
We're going to have.
We'll be pretty close in July.
Yeah, we'll be a little bit ready to go with that.
So now that we've defined them, we got stuck along the way with some of the specifics, and I think we probably let perfection get in the way of completion a little bit here. Yeah. It could have been okay to say that this isn't set in stone 100% yet. But this is probably pretty close. Give those out, let it evolve, change it. I think that'd probably been a better answer than what we've done. But we probably still have that. It's not going to be perfect when they come out the door. But by the 1st of July, we're looking to have all roles completed. And then what's our process going to be to go through that with our employees? What's the rollout going to look like there?
Yeah, it's going to be having, I say, job level conversations with each group. If you are in my world, a client, what we call client success specialist, we're going to have a conversation with those people that are in that role, to where we're going to clearly say, this is what's expected. This is how we're measuring that. This is how you can see status and updates on how well you're doing, those types of things, because we want to make a big deal out of this, because it is maybe not explicitly stated, but I would almost bet that people, underlying, they desire to know these things. I want to know, who doesn't want to know how well they're doing.
Yeah. And the nice thing about this for us is this doesn't have to be done through an evaluation process. This is a constant and real-time tracking of how you're doing. So you shouldn't, if you're hitting your metrics every month, that's okay, I'm succeeding in my role. Now we're going to still celebrate it and talk about coaching and developing and a course correction if it needs to be done. But the reality of it is this gives us a clear picture of, hey, as the, client, customer success specialist, if one of their metrics is a QBR, it's our quarterly business reviews that we're doing. And our metric is they're doing 90% of those every quarter. And if they only hit 60% or 70%, we know we can have a conversation now. But they also knew that during the whole course of the quarter, they're not at their percentages. So it didn't become as a surprise at the end of the quarter. Hey, look, you knew the metric. Yeah. You didn't obtain it. and now we need to talk about how we're going to obtain it next quarter.
Yeah. Yeah. And from a leadership perspective, you get really valuable coaching opportunities in those things.
It's a lot easier conversation too, because you're not having to come up to them going, hey, this metric that we talked about.
Did you know
that you're supposed to hit 90%? Oh, you didn't? Okay, now, hey, by the way, you're supposed to hit 90%. And if you did hit 90%, I'm telling you now. So, and you have no idea where you've been all quarter.
Or my favorite is I know I told you this, but you don't remember. You're saying that you didn't know. Mm-hmm. And then it's an awkward, well, are you lying to me? Are you really, did you really forget?
Right.
And it just, it removes some of that, just awkward conversations.
Very clear what expectations are.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like the same thing as you have a curfew with your kid, right? Curfew is midnight. It's not 12:05. It's not 12:10. It was midnight.
Mm-hmm. And then the fun part comes when they walk in at 12:01, 12:02, 12:10, whatever.
Hey, give me your car keys. It's been fun having those for a week.
Yeah.
I'm going to enjoy driving your car for the next week while you miss curfew.
That's always fun. Good
luck with that, Mike.
I got
a couple years.
Oh, gosh. I got 4 years before I got to worry about it. 3.5. Another piece of this that, that you can easily get in your head about is it can come across as a little bit fluffy. This is, why can't I just have a team that knows what they're expected to do and do it every time? And I don't have to get into all the weeds of this.
If you can do that, it's great. Good luck.
Yeah, no kidding. I just want to remind our listeners that this isn't soft skill, fluffy, culture rah-rah, let's grab a ping pong table and have happy hour type of stuff. This has tangible effect on bottom line of business. Mm-hmm. If we do a terrible job of customer service, and our people that are primarily responsible for customer service are the ones that are producing that results.
Ping pong instead of dealing with our customers. That's usually a problem.
Then there's going to be a clear exodus of customers at some point because my people are not doing their job. And whenever there's clear expectations and we're holding them accountable to those expectations, and everybody's fully aligned with the direction they're supposed to be heading, that's going to produce a tangible effect on your bottom line. This isn't just culture, rah-rah, fluff, organizational health stuff. Yes, it is, but there is true, tangible, quantifiable, measurable results.
Absolutely.
When you have clear expectations and hold people accountable.
And let's say you do have a customer service problem at that point, you can then directly address your metrics. If your metrics are being met and yet they're still not able to get you the customer service results that you want, now it's time to address your metrics again. But you turn a subjective thing into an objective thing, and now you can truly coach and develop off it.
Yeah.
Creating a statistic that you can measure from, it's hard to do if you don't have something.
Yep.
I feel like my
can't fix what you don't measure.
Right. I can't. I feel like my customer service is good, but it's not where I want it to be. Well, then how do you know it's good?
Yeah.
I just feel like it is.
I feel like it is. And that's, you get into
we do it all the time.
Because here's what happens when you start to go into I feel like this is the case, or this is what my hunch says. Not that those are always bad, or they're definitely not even always wrong, but you typically glorify the extremes in those circumstances where I remember this one bad client, and this is the XYZ of what happened there that resulted in us doing a terrible job. And that may be an outlier, but because it's in the extremes and that's what comes up in the spur of the moment when you're thinking about what is going on, and it skews your opinion and your judgment.
This is a flaw I have happen a lot. It's luckily, when I hear from some clients, I don't hear from them regularly. When I do hear from them, they're upset. Well, then if all I've heard for is 3 or 4 things that are upset at the same time, I feel like we have a customer service problem or whatever the issue could be. But the reality of it is the bigger scheme of things is we have one isolated incident of a customer service problem that needs to be addressed, not a system.
It's not a system. Yeah.
And it is very hard. It's very easy for me to lose my perspective of it because I've heard 4 today.
Yeah.
Out of the 4,000 interactions we've had today.
Yeah.
And that's a problem.
Especially when they all come in at the same time.
Yes.
It's like, oh my goodness, the place is burning down.
Correct. And that's where my D comes out and I react before I think. And so I need to
but having those clear metrics, clear measurables to go back to, it grounds you.
Yeah.
Because you can look at those and say, you know what, we're hitting those metrics 3/4 of the time, or, whatever it is. and
Let's
maybe this isn't
Let's see where we lost track.
Yeah, let's get back on the guardrails, do a little bit of adjusting, and see if we can't fix this. But if you aren't measuring these things, if you don't have them defined, if they're not communicated, they're not clear to the entire team, then you really don't have any ways to improve upon.
Yep.
At least not easily.
And this is something just for you guys that aren't aware of, as part of our HR services, this is something that we are doing with our HR clients, right? I mean, so
trying to help them develop these. Yeah.
So our process is obviously a lot of times we can people looking for our help in writing a job description, and we kind of pivot that into, job description is important, but it's really what are the results you're trying to get out of it. And so we use this as part of our HR services, and it's a way for us to understand the role people should be playing in the organization, and it's part of our process of building out their organizational chart, understanding the roles people are fitting in that. And
job description is step one.
Yep. And then from there, it's how does the results work? What are the metrics you want to obtain? And that's what Greg's working on with our clients when he's working with them HR. So if you're having trouble with this, I think we've done a webinar maybe on it already for our HR clients. And we're also,
this is
part of OnRamp, I think.
This is a big conversation that we do on OnRamp, where we actually go through the process of with HR leaders and then sometimes owners, where we actually develop your KRA real time in that OnRamp session, your own KRA.
How the process goes.
Yep.
Correct.
Yep. And we have I think it's 7, maybe it's 6-step process that we walk through, and we give you some time to think and put this on paper. And it's really interesting when we do that, because in real time, we get to see those light bulb moments where it's like, the fun thing is we're dealing with HR leaders. It is, they're sitting there developing their KRA. And I always encourage them at the end of that session, all right, take this back to whoever your leader is, and you sit down and you say, these are the 3 to 5, whatever you write down, these are the most important things in my role. Do you agree with this? Because this is all part of our umbrella strategy. We want to make sure everybody's within the umbrella. When it rains, everybody's safe. And it's interesting that next session when people are coming back and they give that report of, man, my leader thought that I was doing something very different than what I am doing, or my expectation of this role is very different than what their expectation was. And it gives you clarity to be able to know, I need to adjust my thinking, or man, maybe this isn't, we've had people, I don't know if I should say this on the podcast. We've had people quit their job after going through this session because they realized the job that they thought they had was not the job that their leader actually expected them to do. And they realized what you're expecting me to do is not tied in with my gifts, nor is it tied in with my passion. I'm not going to be successful. You're not going to be successful as long as I'm in this role. And they quit their job, which that's only happened once.
Great testimony for signing up for OnRamp. But no, it is, but it only happened once.
It only happened.
But it was for that person, it was probably the right thing to do.
And for the company,
Correct.
It was the absolute, because what we were able to get them to do is actually sit down and have a conversation, leader to direct report. This is what I think winning looks like. And the leader saying, no, that's not what I hired you for. Well, that just cut off potential years, months, whatever, of failure on both sides.
Correct.
Yeah. And that's having a clear understanding of what winning looks like in your role helps that. When it comes from the top down, it's a lot better. But when you could force your leader into that conversation, if you're not if you're a small business, manager, supervisor, leader, whatever, and you can force that conversation with your boss, it is super enlightening.
I know that Shelby is going through that process now with her team, and she's actually she showed them hers and her idea of KRA. And she went down and said, hey, why don't you go ahead and write your KRA, and then we'll review it, kind of go through it together. Sorry. And I think it's a good exercise.
It is.
In certain roles.
If you can actually explain well, this is what the KRA, you have to go through kind of an exercise with that.
I do like the OnRamp exercise, particularly with a person in a leadership role. Getting everybody on the leadership team in agreement that role they're in, the accountability of that role, the both the leader and the overall leader and the leadership team itself, or the leaders in your organization, all in agreement of what each person's role and fit is super huge. When it comes to making sure you have a good, clear picture. As a leader, I'm communicating what my expectations are, and they agree that those are the expectations. And so it's just, I think it's really helping me to get the clarity I really want to have.
Yeah. Which is ultimately going to turn into better team performance, better trust, speed of communication, all of those things that are very measurable and very, very visible in results. So that's a little bit about KRAs. We mentioned OnRamp, where we go into, I mean, we have about, if I remember correctly, it's about a 2-hour session where we actually go through the KRA process with people. I think that's recorded. So if you're interested in seeing that, you can obviously sign up for OnRamp. It's coming up here in a couple months.
When's the next one? September?
It's in July, September, one of the two. We'll make sure that we post it along with the podcast. Yeah. But if you're just curious and you don't, maybe you don't feel like you want to go through the full OnRamp, none of our content is super personal to us, other than the fact that we create it. And you just want to see what that session looks like. I'm sure we could find that recording and share that out with you. And so just let us know. We do have a follow-up from last week. So last week we were talking through marketing, where we had G up here talking through different marketing ideas and whatnot. One of the questions that come, I thought that was a really good question, and it's something we've struggled with internally a little bit, is how do I know when it's time to outsource marketing versus bring that in-house and actually hire a team to do some of this stuff? What does that look like?
So we outsourced our marketing for a long time with a couple different companies. They all did, I would say, a pretty good job. We had a hard time executing on the stuff they wanted us to do. And in our world, I felt like where we could outsource some of our strategy, we really had a hard time outsourcing the execution. Obviously the first major factor was budget, right? So, I mean, can we afford and hire? I mean, that's any outsourcing conversation really starts with a budget. The need, do we have enough work for the person to work full time? And can we find somebody that can have a diverse enough, in marketing, particularly a diverse enough skill set to do some of the pieces, but also be able to raise their hand and know when they're over their head and they need to get more help. Gia is doing an exceptional job in that role today, along with Becky, and that also as a part of that team. And it's them knowing when they need to do it in-house versus raising their hand up. As far as when the time is right, it's when you're not obtaining your goals that you want to obtain. Now, either you have to throw more money at the outsourcing or more money to an internal hire. We wanted to control over the brand more. I think that's what we kind of looked at it as. I want to control over the work we want it done when we want to do it, and also to make sure that it's exactly on brand every time. Control
was a big deal. Mm-hmm. We wanted to be able to maintain that. And anytime you outsource, you give up a little bit of that control, regardless of what the person you're outsourcing to says. Mm-hmm. I think it starts with, what are your goals? Marketing is and we talked about this last week, a big cloud that's nebulous, and how are we going to define that? When I say marketing, you got to define your terms a little bit. Does that mean, what does that really mean? Am I talking about sales organizations? Am I talking about truly inbound marketing? Account based? There's a bunch of different stuff out there in that sphere. And so start with your goals. What do you really, if you could snap your fingers and have successful internal or external marketing team, what results would they be triggering? And from there, you got to back into, can I create that internally with the budget that I have realistically? Or is it possible to outsource those things? Some things in marketing that you think, if I just hire the right company, the results are going to come. If you build it, they will come type stuff. I have not ever found that to be true. There's great marketing companies out there, but they're also, the good ones are also really good salespeople.
Yeah.
And they can convince you of things. And sometimes they may have been successful in those areas, but that's not necessarily the case. And also make sure you go do your homework on those outsourced companies. If you're a product-based business and you're dealing with service-based marketing people, it's a different story.
Yeah. Our clientele is unique. Our service offering is unique. We are a service-based provider, not a product-based provider. We have a technology slant. Is our story being told the right way? Are the materials that we're providing useful to people that we're giving them to? There's a whole bunch of different strategy out there now. It's a very, if I were to snap my fingers and say, this is how I want to market, that's a whole other ballgame. And we're competing against big brands and small, all kinds of, there's a million different competitors out there. My goal in our marketing is to get in front of people so we can have a open and honest conversation about the service we provide and see if they're interested in doing it. And that's a hard thing to get in front of.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's going to be true internally, externally, however you want to look at marketing. It's not something that is as easy as snap your fingers, build it, they will come, whatever you want whatever metaphor you want to use there. It takes some time. And sometimes you need to hire people to do that internally in order for you to have the right amount of control to develop the systems and processes and content that you want to achieve the results you're looking for.
One of the challenges we had and why we decided to bring it in-house was because we didn't have someone in our office dedicated enough to make sure that it was happening.
Yeah.
So part of the hire was...
We got great strategy help.
Correct.
But then when it came to execution, it was me, you, her, who?
Who's going to actually do what you want us to do? Because I don't have that skill set, and who else? I don't have the time.
Yeah.
And so it was now we're probably spending 25% outside on strategy and handling 75% strategy and 100% of execution in-house. Likewise, over time, that mix probably goes up and down. It's probably an area that we probably should look to expand our strategy help sometimes because we get bogged down in the execution now. So it's kind of, it's 6 half dozen.
Yeah. Interesting conversation. If you have no idea what we're talking about, go back to last week, listen to that episode. Gia had a lot of good advice, a lot of good input, and just concepts, ideas to talk about marketing. And it was a really good conversation. But that ends today's conversation. If you're out there listening, again, we really appreciate you joining us. And we hope to see you next time on the One Step Better podcast.